This is Tim Branom, and you're listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studio is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on X at No Shock Pod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Tim Branom, producer, songwriter, and multi-instrumentalist.
Yeah, but mostly known for the metal scene in Seattle.
Yeah, and he had one of his early bands, Gypsy Rose, ended up had a couple guys from Alice in Chains in it.
Absolutely. Also, songwriting credits. I think he set the Guinness Book of World Record for over 500 songwriting credits.
Yeah, and he does some Layne Staley Tribute Shows, so get out there and check it out. We got a couple of announcements here brought to you by Safe Harbor and Ragged Records. Present live music at the Raccoon Motel. Big Brave, Spiritual Poison, and A Seethe on Saturday, August 10th.
Also, Monday, August 12th, National Vinyl Record Day. Get down to Ragged Records in Davenport, Iowa, and check it out. Hey, let's get to that interview.
All right.
Good night. Tim, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce to you my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Tim, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Hey, we're so excited to have you. Thanks you for all the correspondence and all the emails. We're excited to have you. So let's get right into this. This August, you'll be extremely busy preparing to and performing in the Layne Staley Tour 2024 and the Grunge Night, a tribute to Seattle music. Can you give our listeners an insight on both shows and what can your fans expect?
Yeah, well, what's funny is people from all around the world come to these events and they try to turn it into a week-long thing, and you can kind of do it with all the tours and all the old places, all the old clubs and things. But for me, it's just seeing my old people and singing some songs that everybody knows. But for me, it was just mainly about the people, because we all knew each other. But it's pretty exciting. We have at London Bridge Studios, about four of us will be talking about how Layne recorded there, and the mothers of Mike Starr and Layne Staley usually go there. And then, of course, the Fountain Gathering on the Thursday before that, that's where a lot of people just show up, and it doesn't cost anything, of course, but it's a pretty big crowd, and that goes for 3 or 4 hours. That's a yearly thing, and on August 22nd. And then the Friday and Saturday after that, we have the two shows. One's Grunge Night, where it's basically anything goes, but it's planned out. I'll be singing a few songs with Jar of Flies. And then the next night is that's at the Crocodile. And then the Layne Staley Tribute is at the Neptune Theater in the U District, which is actually pretty close to where Layne was living in his last days. So that's interesting.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, it's people, they plan years in advance for this, and I think this is probably the last time I'm going to do this. This is only the third time I've done it since 2004, but it's a pretty thing, a pretty big deal. People are pretty emotional, and these are super fans. These people, yeah, it's crazy. Everybody knows the words to every single song, no matter how obscure.
Oh, very good.
So. Yeah, it's insane. You have to see it to believe it,
Very good. Jeff, go ahead.
Well, yeah, this isn't, you alluded to, this wasn't your, the first time you're going to be doing a show like this. I know you have a couple videos out there from Italy, I think back in 23, where you debuted a song, Eagles of the Night, which is a tribute to Layne. Can you talk a little bit about that song and those performances?
Yeah, it was kind of funny. I didn't really tell anybody, and I just wrote a song for Layne Staley. And I thought, well, what better way, at least for me, is to write a song, because that's what I'm good at. Well, then, unfortunately, I just held on to it. And then Mike Starr died. And I said, oh, my God, I can't leave him out. And those guys were buddies and in the same band. And I knew them both. And so I said, oh, okay, let me rewrite this. And somehow it worked. And I called it the Eagles of Night, which, the Eagles is pretty common in Washington, Seattle, Washington. So I made it into sort of a cartoon version of they were born together, played in a band together, and died together, which of course didn't happen, but it makes sense in the song, and it ended up being a really good song. And so we played it in Italy last year, and then then we also played it in Seattle last year with the electric version with the full band. This year we're not going to do that, but I intend on making a music video for it, and some of the family members have given me some footage that not a lot of people have seen, and we'll try to coordinate it all together. But it's kind of hard legally to get everything so fast. So, everybody wants it right away, but it's hard, with all the legalities. Yeah. So it might have to be at the end of this year or next year, but we'll do it.
Very good. So bringing this back to the Layne Staley tour and the Grunge Night performances, and pardon my ignorance, but can you talk a little bit more about the origins of these two shows? And is this a thing that's been going on for a while now, or I guess I just don't really know a whole lot about it?
Well, Layne Staley died in 2002, and then the next year I was actually involved, 2003 and 2004, with the organization of these, and so it was new. Of course, it's like you just have some family members. Like, what are we going to do? It's not like they're experts in this, So it's kind of started off a little slow, and huge venues, but now it's kind of a lot more organized, and they've done it, every year since 2003. So it's pretty organized now, and so people expect it, and they come from all around the world, and it's a really good experience. We have people from, Italy, Germany, England, Ireland, and it's funny because you get to know these people, and then you meet for a week. And then they go back to where they came from, but it's all one love, which is for Layne Staley and, of course, the Seattle sound. And so I didn't really tell anybody I was involved with the Seattle sound until after Layne died. His family contacted me to help sort of organize things, because they wanted me to get a hold of all the old people and everything from way back. And so I did. And then now it just seems like so many people want to know about that time period, which was the late 80s and early 90s. But I didn't tell anybody in LA for years. I didn't even mention it. But now it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, very good.
Well, those early days. I mean, Seattle became known for the grunge, but they had a pretty vibrant metal scene prior to the grunge scene. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll tell you something kind of interesting now that you asked. So, people think of the metal bands, and I was in 3 or 4 of them back then, and you just think they're all just the same and they're not that big, but it was kind of the opposite. So when Nirvana started coming out in, say, 88, 89, they'd be playing to like a tiny bar downtown with just a couple people, Now, I'm not saying they were playing to crowds like that in Europe, but here in Seattle, that's what they were doing. But the metal bands, wow, we were playing 300, 500, 1,000. So that's where like everybody was, So people have a big misconception. It took, when the whole rest of the world caught on to grunge in like 91, 92, now it was big in Seattle as well. And then they embraced it and never let go. But for years, just right up, you're hearing and seeing all these big bands all over MTV and touring, but in Seattle, it's still not that big of a deal as you think. But then, after the Pearl Jam 10 album came out and gained momentum, then things started happening. So these bands were just playing to tiny amounts of people. Alice in Chains were playing to more people than the other bands because they were sort of, in a way, metal,
Exactly.
A little bit more metal than the other bands.
Oh, very good.
Yeah,
Well,
so that's a big misconception.
I guess the conversation that Jeff and I have had before about the Seattle scene and the grunge movement at the time, and maybe you can shed a little light on this for us and our listeners. The whole Seattle image thing, it totally took away from the hair metal guys at the time, if that you want to use that as a reference. But how much of the Seattle grunge image was, I guess, cultivated from Seattle, or was it more of a record label creation or record labels creation?
Well, okay, I can only tell you my point of view because I saw it happen really fast, but it was weird. So I'll just take Layne Staley, for instance. So he was always a little ahead of the pack with clothes and his look. I remember in 1986, he was really into Dead or Alive, and then Poison and Guns N' Roses. He was really on the track of looks and new bands. I don't know how he even knew, but he did somehow. And so he would reflect that in his wardrobe. Well, so we called it glam at one point. We never said the words hair metal ever. That came 30 years later. People made that up. Or even grunge, never heard that term. But so all of a sudden, I was going to this studio called London Bridge and quite often, like every weekend. And Alice were there, were doing some demos and their album Facelift. And so I would see them, and I would see Mother Love Bone were starting to record with producer Terry Date, and then all these bands. And they all started playing shows together. And I think what happened is Layne was a couple of years younger than a lot of these guys, and that was a big thing. If you're a year and a half younger, that's gigantic when you're only 18, 19, So I think he looked up to these bands, so like Mother Love Bone, and I think it just started being a thing where, I don't really know. It'd be interesting to find out who came up with the idea, but the long underwear and all that stuff, they started all just doing it, right? And people like me fought it. We wouldn't do it, right? But everywhere I'd go, they started to do that. And it's another kind of creepy thing was that a lot of people didn't have jobs and just lived places and couldn't even take showers. And so that was a part of it too. I mean, it's when you see their hair messed up, it's really because they didn't take a shower. It's not because they did it on purpose, Yeah. And some people didn't smell very good. I'll tell you that. But yeah, so all of a sudden they started doing that. So I started seeing the bands like Mother Love Bone and Alice, and I'm trying to think of some of the other ones, mainly from the London Bridge studios. And they all were recording there and getting demo deals and then finding record deals. And I just think, maybe there was somebody at the label that was kind of pushing into that. That's totally possible. But, nobody told me about it. But since they're paying the bills, you never know. It's possible.
Exactly. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, to follow on with the London Bridge Studios thing, in today's world, more bands are recording stuff, at home and sending the files back and forth. So that whole part of the studio of running into these other bands and hearing these stories of so and so was in this side doing this thing and we were over here doing this. That's kind of becoming a lost art. Can you talk a little bit about your
I remember. Here I had this little project of 4 songs, which was kind of remnants of the band Gypsy Rose. And it cost so much money that I just wanted to finish it. But, it took a couple years and a lot of money. And started in LA and then finished in Seattle at London Bridge. So by the time I was finishing it, it was like 5 years too old. It was just metal. And now we have this new sound and no one can put their finger on it. But it just kind of, grungy, out of tune is okay. No really guitar solos and people singing lower, all that stuff. And, but, every time I go in the studio, we would run into people, or like I remember one time I had someone bring in an amp and special microphones for me, and we were just having a bad day. Like nothing sounded good. So Rick Parasher, the studio owner and producer there, he died unfortunately, but he was really good. And he called Jerry Cantrell and said, "Hey, can Tim borrow your Randall amp?" Which I didn't really like that amp, but it was there, And so he lent me that amp for a day, and so that's the kind of stuff that would happen because just equipment was always there from other bands. And I remember just seeing the actual 2-inch master tapes of all the bands in the closet for years. You know, you'd show up 10, 15, 20 years later, you open up that closet door and they're all in there. The bands just trusted
Awesome.
the studio. They left everything. Temple of the Dog or whoever.
Yeah. Let's bring this to, I guess maybe at the present time right now, you are pursuing a songwriting publishing deal. Can you give our listeners an insight to this new Tim Branom music?
Well, you know, for somebody like me that's touched success here and there, you know, unless it's some big band that's, you know, touring and you're winning the lottery, you know, like Stone Temple Pilots or something, it's not really going to be beneficial for me to kill myself and try to, you know, get the music out. Luckily, people do care when I do something, but I've decided to try to get a songwriting deal. And so that's kind of my aim for the next year, 1 to 2 years. And I've just been going back to all the old music from the 80s to the present, and I'll be releasing a bunch of stuff on CD and vinyl. And so the Seattle metal bands are actually popular, and people want to hear that stuff in other countries. So luckily I was a part of that, but I'll also be trying to get a songwriting publishing deal, and we'll see if it works. But it's something I probably should have done decades ago, but I never thought of it. But now that I've accumulated so many songs, that's a good thing for me to do. And then of course I'll still be making music videos and doing shows and whatever, but really that'll be my focus, is just writing songs and trying to get a songwriting deal with a major publisher.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, yeah, talk a little bit about your, you know, being a producer versus a songwriter. You know, do you have, you know, for you, how does it work? Do you have to, you know, take one hat off and put the other one on, or is it pretty seamless?
Yeah, well, you know, it's better if you know a lot about the instruments, because when you're working with a band, then you can see through their eyes, you know. So if you know the instrument, you know, and you're directing them to do something or suggesting something, then it's a lot better than if you're clueless, you know. And we do have those producers out there, like, you know, Rick Rubin or somebody that's not a musician, but and they still get it done. But somebody like me, I like to know all the stuff. And so I like to do pre-production with the band and for a few months and literally record everything and then record it again, you know. And so, you know, we just cover every little bit of it, you know, the actual, the physical art of the playing, you know. So if someone's not up to par, I try to get all that happening, you know, like really go for it, you know. It's better to wait a few months and have somebody practiced up, and so you get a good performance than just rushing it. And, you know, so that's kind of the way I do things. And then I'm pretty hands-on with mastering as well. So, and I'm an analog guy, so I try to use as much analog gear as possible.
Very good. So on to the next question here. So, you know, when it comes to Tim Branom, the songwriting, I guess maybe songwriting is maybe at the forefront of your career as we speak right now, opposed to musicianship or mastering or producing or whatever. But I guess, you know, for you as the artist that you are, what comes first in the order? Is it the songwriting? Are you more of a songwriter than a musician right now, or is it musicianship first and then songwriting? Or kind of break it down for us.
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny is people, they could never put a label on me, and it's always been that way. They're trying to say, well, who is this guy? What does he do? You know, if you look at Dave Grohl, something like that maybe, but I'm a little bit more technical, you know, and I've worked with other bands. So sort of like that, you know. I mean, I play my worst instrument is drums, but I play a little of everything, and I've put a lot of hours in over the years. So I'm sort of known more as a singer and a songwriter. But as far as styles go, I've done almost every style you can think of, because I worked at a label for 26 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, when the job comes in the door, you just have to do it. It doesn't matter if it's rap or country or whatever it is, you know. So that taught me a lot, and working with deadlines. And I think that's one of the biggest things that bands, at least, you know, it's been a history where bands think they have forever to finish something, and it's really not. You know, it's like there's a deadline, and even for the audience, like if you don't get it out there in time, you know, the same thing that you thought was great, they don't even think is great anymore. So,
yeah.
You know, because styles change. So,
yeah. Very good.
Yeah, just talk from your perspective, I guess, a little bit about, you know, the current scene a little bit, and how, you know, releasing singles versus releasing an album, and you know, you got to get them out there, and then, you know, a couple weeks later, like you said, the song's gone and everybody's on to the next thing. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, the challenges of that and working through that in today's climate?
Yeah, well, I foresaw this a long time ago where, to get people to listen to your music, you really need to make a music video. And, of course, people can make something in literally 30 seconds with AI, and it might even be okay. But whatever it is you get them to listen to, just do it. But I personally have gone the extra mile to make these music videos that are like little movies. And so luckily that did something different, and it wasn't just like 30 plays. So, but I think, people are now, that whole assembly line of making a song now know that they have to make a music video for it, and they just naturally do it now. And because, TikTok and Instagram and Facebook are embracing it. And so it's really happening now. It's just a part of the songwriting process. And so singles, I haven't really seen too many people releasing albums anymore. I mean, it seems to be just, we'll throw a song out there and see what happens, but I think it's the bands that have a style that want to make a dent in the industry, where they have enough songs to make an album, and then they can really show their style, because people just don't really know what you're about from one song. They need, an entire album. And then, before Led Zeppelin 1 or before Van Halen 1, it didn't exist. And so if people heard just one song, it sounds great, but who are you?
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that would bring up to my next question is, in this modern day of the music business, and with the decline of MTV not being what MTV once was in popular culture, I guess with the rise of platforms like TikTok, do you see music videos becoming the forefront again of popular culture in music, or are we going to miss that as a popular culture necessity in the music business, I guess?
Yeah.
Well, you're right. I mean, like, if everybody's making a music video, but they're not all that amazing, you're gonna have to really try even harder now, I think, than when MTV was around. And I think that's really the only thing. You're trying to get the public to know who you are. So I think you got to even go more shocking and more radical. And the song is not enough anymore, and they like to watch while they listen. And now we have algorithms that can track it and see how long on YouTube or TikTok, how long they listen to the song. And so the goal is the whole duration of the song. So I think it's forcing people to try even harder, because if they don't, they just get lost with all the other people.
Well said.
I guess I'm going to kind of take it back a little bit. You talk about one of the shows you got coming up is at the Crocodile, and in some towns and some artists we talk to, the legendary venues have closed down over the years and stuff. The Crocodile's legendary, and the Whiskey A Go Go in LA is still around and legendary. But from your perspective, a lot of are a lot of the clubs shutting down or closing, or are bands still getting out there and having places to play, or what do you see?
Well, I live here in Los Angeles, and I'm watching clubs like the Whiskey, and they're surviving off these jam nights, and things like that, which is kind of a big thing, and they're pulling in the crowds. But original music is not as big right now. It's a lot of cover bands, so that's kind of what's happening here. I can't speak for Seattle, but in LA, that's what's happening.
Yeah, that's
cover bands.
That's a bummer to me. Jeff and I kind of Jeff and I kind of argue back and forth about this. Is like, this is not acceptable. That I want original music. But going to the next question, and this is a question that will lead into what we're just talking about, is pop culture. Rock and roll is not at the forefront of popular culture anymore. It's country music. Country music is the forefront now. But what in your eyes, what will it take for rock music to get back into first place in pop culture?
I think it's the same reason it got there before. I think they really have got to try harder. I think, I remember seeing this in the 90s when, nothing against Green Day, I love them, but, they weren't guitar heroes, and we had guitar heroes before that. So all these kids start playing guitar. It's 1993, and they're learning to play guitar. And then their guitar hero doesn't play solos, really, right? So the musicianship wasn't really at the top. And then you fast forward another 30 years, and then look what happened. So now those people didn't have anybody to learn from that were current. And so it was just, there wasn't a lot of drive. There wasn't a lot of effort put forward. And then, so I think now it's going to take a band to really step out and try harder. That's basically what it is.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just rest on your laurels of playing, you know, distorted Les Paul through a Marshall anymore. It's got to be a lot more than that, you know, to get someone's attention.
Agreed.
All right. Well, let's talk a little. You brought up Gypsy Rose and bringing it from LA to Seattle. Can you take us back to those early days and, you know, talk about the formation of the band?
Yeah, let's see. Our friend Samantha Johnson, she came up with the name, and she sort of put a band together around me. She said, look, I know you have your friend on drums, the Mike Gersema, who ended up playing with MSG and LA Guns later.
Yeah.
And then we went through a couple of guitar players. The main guy was Brock Growey, but we also had Tony Avalon, and we also had Jerry Cantrell. And then the bass player that was mainly in the band was Mike Starr, and he ended up playing with Alice as well as Jerry.
Yeah.
So we had this weird combination. It was, you know, we have 4 strong personalities, you know, very, very strong. It really comes out of the music. I mean, it's not like nobody is not strong. I mean, I'm, you know, just very strong and stubborn, you know, and you put those guys in the same room, you get a sound that isn't really duplicated. And so here was this band that we didn't have any official releases. We only played a handful of shows here and there with that, some of the lineups. And then we had another lineup later, but people are still talking about it because not only did that band break up and become Alice in Chains, but we were a sound that like defined a Seattle metal sound that it was just like the focus point. Like we had a Dio type vocal, Ronnie James Dio, and then we had like a Zach Wilde type guitar, and then we had a Tommy Aldridge type drummer, and then we had a Rudy Sarzo type bass player, and all good looking guys. And we had huge crowds for the shows, and it was just amazing, you know, to see all the excitement in that. And it's never been duplicated again, you know. And so it was just it's so much drama and heartache and it was just it could literally be a movie about what happened with those guys. And unfortunately most of them died, you know, so I'm one of the few that's left. But yeah, it was an amazing, a very aggressive, just powerful band. But yeah, so I'm working on a bunch of the songs. It might take me a couple of years, but eventually we'll release them on vinyl and CD.
Well, on your website, I saw you had 4 tracks for people to sample, and they were pretty dang good. So I can't wait to hear what else you got there. Out there.
Oh yeah, they can download those for free if they want. Yeah, and there's a few, but we have another, I don't know, 15 to 18, something like that.
Awesome.
Oh, so cool.
It's mainly, yeah.
I wanted to bring this to 2009, 2010. You partnered with Steve Vai to start the record label Classical Nation. Can you talk a little bit more about this endeavor that never really kind of got off?
Yeah, that was another only in LA type thing. So here I am, you know, I'm just recovering from the ashes of everything that's just going on. You know, it's just like the music industry is like turned upside down. Who knows what band you're going to play in again, and they all just break up after a tour or an album. So Steve asked me to start a label with him, and so we worked on it for like, I think it was a year and a half, something like that. And he always ends each label with Nation, you know, so it's favorite nations, and then this was Classical Nation. So we worked on it, but it just didn't really seem to take off, and the whole goal was to grab all this music with all the top conductors in the entire world, you know, remix and master them, and then put them online so people can buy them. But it was just in the infancy of downloading where people just weren't into it, you know, and it was only coming for older people, and the younger people didn't care. And it was just, in the end, it just kind of faded away. So yeah, we just had to throw in the towel.
Oh, bummer. Such a bummer.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. Yeah.
And then you also had a band, Cloud9, and you didn't have a lot of information about that other than you had several tracks you could listen to on your website that kind of had, was that more of like a stoner classic rock vein?
I guess we, you know, and maybe that's me, the non-drug guy that's making it look like a druggy band, but we weren't. But you know, I like the image, but yeah, no, that was my baby. We had that band for about 7 years, and we had a couple different lineups, but it was a very strong band, and there's some great songs, but it was the wrong time.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was just it was sort of like a Zeppelin, Hendrix, Beatles type band.
Yeah.
And with the harmonies in there too from Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. So it was a really interesting band, all real instruments, sitar and harmonium and mellotron and everything. It was just really bizarre. And that'll be released as well. We had talked to a couple of different labels. So it's a shame that at least one album wasn't released, but we recorded like 70 songs. But that was a really great band. And we played all the venues, and the music industry was just dying. It was right there at the end of 1999 when we finally just decided to give it up. And we were the very last band to flyer on the Sunset Strip, and you'd get fined if you did that now. And it was just changing. It was like a change in the guard. We had this psychedelic type band with like a Robert Plant type singer, and then and it was just too different. It wasn't the Black Crowes, and it wasn't this, and there was just no space for it right then. So the labels, we had a little label interest, but never got anything. And so finally we just had to all go our separate ways, and it was sad, but yeah, but we'll release that music someday. It's really good.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
At the present time, you're involved with a documentary film. Can you give our listeners an insight to what's going on?
Yeah, Vicky Shasa contacted me. She's the creator and cinematographer, and they've talked to some well-known people, and they're trying to get everybody attached and the funding and everything right now. But in the meantime, we're doing some quick little interviews in Seattle and filming some of the live stuff that we're doing here in August with me and the other bands, because the film is basically, it's hard to describe. I'd have to have you explain it, but it's a documentary, but in a different perspective. It's almost like the people that are still alive from the original grunge era. And, of course it centers on Chris Cornell and Layne Staley, but so they've been talking to a few different people. They met with Lars Ulrich's manager a couple weeks ago, and we're hoping to meet with him. They were trying to get him to narrate it. We'll see. It could happen, Mm-hmm. And so it's really exciting. And, in Seattle, people get mad when they hear about another documentary. They said, "Oh no, we don't want to talk to you," because this has happened like 10 times. But this time it's different, and so we'll see. But funding for a movie is a lot. It's millions of dollars, so we'll see. But it's looking pretty good so far. So, but they still will be filming in August, and maybe even at London Bridge too. We're still waiting for an interview there. So it's exciting that somebody wants to do this and it has the passion. For people like me, it's really fun to see people really interested in what happened to us, and then it's kind of the where are they now kind of thing too.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Fantastic. Well, probably our listeners do not realize that you are in the Guinness Book of World Records for having over 600 songwriting credits. Is this true?
Oh. Well, okay, here's what happened. I think there's people out there now that have passed that. There was a point where I would have been. I was working for a label for 26 years called Delta Entertainment, which is the umbrella for a lot of different labels. And, like any label, they have their quarterly releases, and there's a lot, And when you've got one guy in this department and then you've got the 12 graphic artists, that's what happens. It's just your job, and you work on it every single day. Well, and they're all being released, Costco, Target, Walmart, Best Buy, all around the world, And so, so I think it went to over 600 releases before finally they went bankrupt in 2008 and then changed their name. And I've had #1 albums in the classical charts, but nobody really knows about that stuff. But yeah, it was crazy. We have the release schedule, and they're all names you've heard of. And sometimes they're re-records or live stuff or whatever, or sometimes they're brand new original music. But yeah, that was an amazing time where, you're, every month or two you're releasing another 50 albums, and it was crazy. Yeah. And they sell, and they're the names you've heard of. And so, yeah, that was, but I was working in a lot of different areas. So it might be just liner notes. It might be mastering. It might be editing, or the musician, or even the producer. But, I was working at a record label, so it's whatever they want me to do, So,
very good. Very good.
Well, you also talked about on your website that your dad was in a 1960s band, the Mark IV. Can you talk a little bit about his contribution to music?
Yeah, well, he was about 20 when he started really getting things happening when I was born to him. He was a drummer, but also a multi-instrumentalist, and he sang and wrote songs. And so that was his thing. Like, he could play anything. He was just naturally gifted, and then that's where I picked up the same thing. But so we toured, and that was his job. It was like a top 40 band, but they also recorded some original music, and they only released 145. And then they changed their name to the Mark V when they added a keyboard player. But all through the 60s and the early 70s, so I toured with them, and all around, Hawaii to Vegas to Boston to California, everywhere. And I was just the kid with the wives and the other kids, and we traveled, and it was just something like out of a movie. Like, yeah, my dad's going to work, and now he's opening up for the Four Freshmen, and he's the drummer, And it was just a really bizarre time with, tiki and go-go dancers and cherry cokes, and it was the 60s. It was just really bizarre,
We're out of our allotted we're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything that we left off? Is there anything we left off that you would like to plug or promote?
No, we covered everything. Just hope to see everybody in August and to see them in person. It's fun to meet people that you just see online.
Oh, fantastic. Well, like I said before, this is how things are going to work out once Jeff, the editing ninja over here, cleans up all of my boogers. We'll get this out to you all cleaned up, and it'll sound like $1 million. Sound good?
That would be great. I can't wait.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for.
Well, hey, man, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
I've enjoyed your stories a lot as a teenager in the 80s music, and then a college student in the grunge area. It's I like both sides, and so.
Oh, thanks! You guys are great interviewers.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
You guys are great, and I can't wait to see this. And I've heard of everybody that you've interviewed too, which is really cool.
All right, man. Well, listen, I will be in touch with you. And
okay, sounds cool. Sounds cool.
Be well. Have a good weekend.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. Bye.
Everybody Everybody pulls the plug and says their last goodbyes. Move to the sunshine, fight the grip of nights. If they ever take from you, then you plug out both their eyes. They roll the dice. Take your chances.
Welcome to the night. You think you know Night Demon? Then the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast is for you. Step into the darkness as we peel back the curtain to give you an unprecedented, all-access look into the mind and the heart of the demon. We're talking band history, song analysis, studio anecdotes, stories from the road. It's everything a diehard Night Demon fan could want and more. This is the only place to learn the inside scoop, the deep dive trivia, the untold tales from the band members themselves and those closest to the Night Demon story. Need more? The Sacred Night Demon Crypt will be pried open to reveal demo recordings that have never before seen the light of day, all with in-depth commentary by the band and the people who were there for the writing and recording process. This is a gold mine, a treasure trove of all things Night Demon. Head over to nightdemon.net or wherever you listen to podcasts.